I want to start out by saying that everything that most of you may know about fundraising, I want to call it into question. Because in general, I think a lot of us in the nonprofit sector in particular, but just working in community organizing in general, have this sort of tin cup mentality when it comes to fundraising, where we're sort of begging for alms. And I think that is a fundamental problem, and it inhibits us from raising the kind of money that ultimately we need in order to best serve the community. And to me, this story is best told by one of my heroes, Bill Cosby. So does anybody know where Bill Cosby went to college? Temple University, exactly, in Philadelphia. And there's this amazing story that, believe it or not, directly relates to fundraising. Because what happened was, Bill was a master's student at Temple, and he was in this philosophy class. He had 150 people in this hour-long class, right? And this entire class that's full of 150 master's and doctorate students, they spent 1 full hour debating, is the glass half full or half empty? And as you might imagine, they didn't really get too far. It was a pretty circuitous and circular discussion and argument. And so he was pretty frustrated. You know, he's working hard to put himself through school, and he, leaves after an hour of wasting 150 people's time. He's huffing and puffing and, walking through the Philadelphia streets, and he finally gets home. And his grandmother's there waiting for him. And she says what grandmas always say when you come home from school: "How was class today, Bill?" And he says, "Oh, well, I really don't want to talk about it. I'm, kind of frustrated." And she presses him and says, "No, really, I want to know, how was class today, Bill?" And he says, "Well, Grandma, if you must know, it was incredibly frustrating. We had 150 master's and doctorate students. We sat around for an hour debating one question: is the glass half full or half empty?" And his grandmother, with a second grade education, mind you, without missing a beat, says, "Oh, well, that's easy. It depends on if you're pouring or drinking." Pouring or drinking. And the reason I want to share that story is that because I think all too often in our work, we think of ourselves as the drinkers, right? We don't realize that, in fact, doing this work, we are the pourers. We are the nurturers of society. And when we're doing fundraising, we're not begging for alms. We are, in fact, giving people an opportunity to invest their money in creating the change that they want to see in the world. And I think that, more than anything else we're going to talk about today, that map is really crucial from a standpoint of how you approach fundraising. The way that I've really heard it said is that people don't give to you, they give through you. You're not asking for money for yourself or even your organization. You're asking for the cause and the community. So let's get into some of these actual concrete tips. And just so you know, the book that Nikki referenced, Nonprofit Management 101, which actually just came out, this has contributions from 50 different authors across 35 topics. It's all very practical, very picks and shovels. Nikki helped co-author the chapter on online peer-to-peer fundraising, so we'll cover some of those. But what we've done is we've lifted out a couple of the really concrete tips that are going to be very helpful for you, hopefully. So one that I really love is the idea of organizing a thankathon. Compass Point did a study of executive directors, and they found that the two most pressing concerns of executive directors, number one was fundraising responsibilities, number two was their board. And in particular, getting your board to fundraise can be a real big challenge, especially if I see so many nodding heads right now, especially if when you're first starting out you have a working board and they're not used to fundraising and they don't think of themselves as fundraisers. So how do you create a migration path for them to get engaged in fundraising? And the smartest way I've heard about this, which Bob Zimmerman, who wrote the chapter on getting your board to fundraise, shared, is this notion of organizing a call-a-thon where basically you just get all of your board to come into the office one day and you call existing donors not to ask for money, but simply to say thank you, simply to give them an update on the board's work. And what does that do? It does a couple things. Number one, it engages your board in interacting with donors, which is part of the fundraising process. Fundraising is not only about making the ask, it's also about cultivation and stewardship. So now they are on the field, now they're playing ball. And number two, it starts to build up a relationship with your donors so that you're not only calling them or emailing them or contacting them when you need money. Really, really powerful but simple tool. Number two, this one's sort of surprising a little bit, but as I counsel people on foundation fundraising and grant writing, this is probably the most important thing that I say, is I have a rule. I never submit a grant request if I haven't been invited to submit that request. The odds of you actually getting a grant go up about at least 10 times if you get an invitation to apply. So if I've gone to the Foundation Center and identified 10 foundations that I think are a really great match for my organization or my client, I'll get on the phone, go to their offices, go to a conference that you know they're going to meet at, and somehow make an effort to connect with them. Because if you're just sending something in based off of what you see on the website, it is possible that based on how well written your proposal is and what a great fit it may be for their philanthropic priorities, you can get a grant. But your odds are going to go way up if you warm up the lead. And what I mean by that ultimately is, as I said, the goal is really securing an invitation. But what are the pieces of information that you're ideally looking to get out of a call or a meeting with a program officer, which is kind of foundation speak for the person who holds the purse strings and runs a specific program area like homelessness or healthcare or the environment. And ultimately, they're the ones putting a slate of grant requests in front of the board and asking for approval. So that's the key decision maker, is the program officer. So the things that I like to do in those calls and meetings, number one is what I call the PASTA test, right? And this is about understanding how to speak about your organization as a whole and about your individual projects and programs and initiatives in kind of elevator pitch speak so that you can very quickly identify where the matches are. You know, first of all, hopefully you've done your homework before that call or that meeting, so you have a sense of their priorities and where you may fit, but it's never exactly as you expected. So what you do is you kind of throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. And they'll tell you very quickly, oh, that's not a fit. Oh, that could be interesting, yeah. And the other thing you'll do in that conversation is you'll start to identify not only the programs, but the positioning. There's some language about their theory of change and how they think about grant making on their website, but there's always language, there's always framing that isn't on their site that is how they talk about their philanthropic giving internally. And that's what you're listening for, is number one, what should we be asking for money for, and how should we position it vis-a-vis the goals of the funder? So that's about the positioning. You're also asking them simple questions like deadlines. And this is not just the deadline that is due based on the site. I'll get to the Jedi mind trick in a second, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But it's about asking them, when would it be best for you if I can get this proposal by? And also, this is kind of funny, but it's very direct and very true, is how much money should we ask for? What's the sweet spot for a first-time grantee asking you for money of a program of this nature? Is it reasonable to ask you to underwrite the whole program at $250,000, or should we make a $30,000 ask? You know, so now what you're leaving with is you're leaving that conversation or that meeting with an invitation to submit a grant request for a specific program or initiative or for general operating support, positioned a certain way, by a certain time, with a certain dollar amount attached to it. So now you're just kind of following orders. And the final thing, the Jedi mind trick, is about asking the person, the program officer, to proofread a draft of your proposal before you formally submit it for approval. Because what that does is it gives them a sense of ownership of this proposal. Because now you're submitting it to them, they may get back to you with some feedback about, oh, well, I think you missed the mark here, or you might want to reposition that, or they may just go ahead and submit it as is, but all of a sudden they've kind of put their stamp on it, and now they're really representing that proposal to their colleagues. So that's how to warm it up.
Now that you've got like the grant side of it, I want to kind of put it in perspective. Over the past 60 plus years, the Giving USA organization has combined data that tells us as nonprofit professionals where the money is coming from for registered 501c3s in the United States. So for more than 60 years, it's been 80% roughly coming from individuals and about 11 to 12% from grants and foundations, and the remainder coming from corporations and you know, businesses. So do know that the biggest piece of the pie comes from individuals like you and I. It's not coming from grants, it's not coming from foundations, it's not coming from corporations. And I'm not saying that money does not still flow freely from these sources. It does. But statistically, empirically, as reported to the IRS, by the 501c3s on their 990s, this and the 1040 tax returns of the individuals giving the money that is tracked and calculated, the majority of the money overwhelmingly comes from individuals like you and I. And for us as nonprofits to be able to engage these donors and get them to part with those hard-earned dollars, we need to identify something first. Linkage, interest, and ability. LIA. Do they have a link to your organization? Are they interested in the mission that you are trying to meet in your community or in the area that you serve? And then most importantly, do they have an ability to give or to support with time, talent, or treasure to your organization? How many people in here know Hank Rosso? He's not alive, but there you go. And what is his famous quote, please? People give to... Thank you. Hank Rosso is kind of like, you know, George Clinton is the godfather of funk, and James Brown is the godfather of soul, and Mal Warwick is the godfather of direct mail. Well, Hank Rosso is the godfather of credentialed, respected, professional, non-profit employees like ourselves. Hank Rosso came up with the Certificate for Fundraising Management. He came up with the curriculum for the CFRE, the Certified Fundraising Executive Credentials that I hold, as well as the curriculum that we have at USF and at the Indiana School for Center for Philanthropy and Nonprofits. And Hank taught us that people give to people and through people. And why do they give to people? Because they were asked. That's another one of the great quotes. Besides you, was there anyone else in the room, I'm sorry I wasn't looking, that also knew who Hank Rosso was? Okay, so what's the number one reason why you didn't get a gift? Very good, you did not ask. That is the number one reason why you're not going to get a gift. Now, the number two reason could be a lot of different things, but if you don't ask, you're definitely not going to get the gift. Very rarely does a big whale of a donor dripping in cash that they need to get rid of go, oh, nonprofit, I have $2 million that I would love to give to you because I like your logo. You know, you wish. It just it doesn't really turn out that way. And when you go through and you ask for things, it's better to give tangibles. And when I say a tangible, it's like, for example, with the tornadoes that just ravaged the Midwest, $100 will get a mop and a bucket and a broom and some bleach and some towels to someone that they can go and start cleaning up their home. That's $100. You know that $100 would cover this stuff and the distribution, you know, the administration of getting these things and distributing them to people that need them. Let's say that we're going to meet needs for Katrina. You know, we were able, when I was still working with the Salvation Army, we were able to say how much money it would cost us to feed this family of 4 3 meals a day from our mobile feeding kitchens. So if you knew that you could give $86 and it would feed this family of 4 3 meals a day for an entire week, that's not a lot of money when you think about, now it's because of the economy of scale that the Army can do that, but the idea of you have this tangible, that I can afford $86, that's like taking my family out to dinner one night, my family of 4, and to think that I could make a difference in that family for a whole week. The more concrete and the more tangible your ask can be, the more likely you are to have that call to action met.
And the other point that Nikki's bringing up is she talked about $86 or $100, right? And that's really the point here about making a direct and a specific ask, is it's about explicitly asking for the funds or inviting the support rather. And it's about saying, I'd like to invite you to make a gift of $50,000, of $1,000, of whatever that number is, but it's a tangible and a concrete and a discrete number. And of course they could give more, they could give less, they could say no, but it's about asking for a specific amount.
It also begins this relationship of transparency and accountability. I am transparent as a nonprofit as to what I'm going to do with the funds that you have entrusted me with. And moreover, I am accountable to you as the donor to provide these services for this specific ask that you funded, whether it's $25 or $25 million. This is Kay Sprinkle Grace, and she's one of my heroes. Kay is probably best known for being Miss PBS and Miss NPR. Just about anything that has more than 6 figures in it, Kay has been a part of raising for NPR and PBS. She also hails from San Francisco and is one of the authors in the book. And Hank taught us that people give to people, but Kay is the one that talks about transformational giving and that people give through you. That this sounds kind of churchy, but that we as nonprofit professionals are the instrument in which people make their gifts turn into realities. You know, we're their philanthropic instrument. We connect them with the need that needs to be met, and we show them that we're meeting that need. They're not just giving to a mission, they're giving to something that they can meet. How many of you have heard of Charity Waters? Charity Waters? So Charity Waters is something that does a very good job. It's one of the most successful websites for raising money online, especially peer-to-peer individual volunteer fundraisers, because they give you a tangible. This much money puts this many gallons of potable water in this place. And water is something very basic and concrete that we need. It's not, I want to have the black-eyed peas at my high school graduation. It's, I have to have water to sustain my life to make it to graduation. So it's that you can translate what that need is and make it something that is tangible, that people can identify with, that they feel they're able to fund.
And that's charitywater.org for those of you that are interested.
So you want to also, now that you've identified your need, you've asked for something specific, you've defined what that money that you've luckily gotten because you linked, identified, and found the ability of the person, asked them for something specific, defined what it was, and now you have the impact to measure. Now you're going to use that as the material to raise more money for your next campaign. But you're looking and you're like, I'm just not doing very well. People are opening the email and they're getting to the website, but they're not responding to my call to action to give or to donate. Well, the same rules apply. Whether you're doing a direct mail campaign or a online giving campaign or a social media campaign or a text message campaign, the same rules apply. A/B testing. Test, 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 test again, refine, test, test, test. The same rules apply in all mediums, whether it's old school paper or brand new short codes. Everything in between you should test. Chris Hughes ran the Obama campaign. They tested the color of the donation button for raising money, and Democracy in Action was the most successful political fundraising campaign in our country's history. They changed the button color. Every time they would test, it would go up 15%. And it wasn't even the same. It was just the fact that they kept testing and that the body of people that kept growing, that were following and being part of the Obama for America campaign, their preferences changed as the organization or the constituency grew. Something that's a little more concrete and that we can wrap our hands around, or maybe our minds, I should say, is Network for Good, which is a common online giving payment gateway and service provider to nonprofits. They did a test on their website and they checked blue versus gray for their donate button. Was it red?
Red versus gray.
Red versus gray. Red gave them a 30% lift. But all they had to do was test. How cheap. It's very inexpensive to run a campaign, especially on a web page where all you're doing is testing the color of the button. I mean, if you had to do this in a traditional medium, it would be much more expensive because of the postage and the printing and the graphics and all that, but changing the color of your button is something very simple. So you have all of these different tools in this flexible medium of online fundraising and your donation buttons and where the button appears and how long or short your email is. My point is test. You should know your community as best you can. It's a dialogue, and they may not be talking to you when they're clicking on one of these other buttons, but they're still communicating with you. It's a nonverbal communication because you can track which one was clicked more. This group got the blue button, this group got the red button. They clicked it 45%, they clicked it 15%. We're going with this button. You know, I mean, it's the same type of market research that Coca-Cola or Budweiser or anybody else uses. You test, 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 test. Heifer International has been around for quite some time. I thought they came into their being when they were first mentioned on the West Wing, and that show's not even on the air anymore. But Heifer International is the group that kind of put together this piecemeal concept of fundraising. And I don't mean piecemeal in a negative way, I mean it in a very positive way. There are people in countries, in developing countries, that can't afford a goat or a cow or chickens. And it's not that they're going to slaughter that animal immediately. It's that they will have eggs and they will have milk and they'll be able to make cheese. And there are all these things that can come from it. And the waste of the animal can be fertilizer for their gardens. But to be able to go out and buy livestock was prohibitive. But you could go and you could sponsor a bee or a bunny or a goat. There are all these different animals that people could go and buy a portion of. And if you didn't have, it's like micro fundraising, if you will, instead of micro lending like what Kiva does. This is kind of like the beginning of what Kiva was conceptualized upon. But the idea is to make it shine. This little gray guy right here, it's neat, it's got dimension, it's got some shadows, but this little kid right here is holding a baby goat. And you're gonna donate a baby goat. I mean, like, there's nothing that sells better than kids, babies, and puppies. You know, kittens, puppies, like Humane Society, got us cornered. You know, I mean, if you're an animal lover, you have your little puppies, you test. If you like kittens, you get kitten emails. If you like puppies, you get puppy emails. If you like gerbils, you get gerbil emails. But you want to know your donor, know what their interest is. They're already linked to you. Identify their interest, and then work on their ability to give to you, that LIA, because it all builds on each other. You want to add anything to this?
Yeah, just really quickly. The other thing I wanted to just mention is to stay out of your own way. And they've done a ton of research when it comes to online giving. And for every click that you add to the process it takes to donate, you lose over 10% of your audience. So take the time to actually count how many clicks does it take to get from your homepage to make a donation. And if the answer is anything more than 3 or 4, you need to cut that significantly and basically as much as possible. So streamlining the donation process is hugely important from an online giving standpoint, just as, you know, mapping donations to impact and making it as concrete as possible.
So I'll give you 2 tertiary, or really, you know, grounded tips on this. So let's say that your call to action is to acquire new constituents. You're trying to build your list so that the next time you have an action alert or a fundraising campaign, that you have a big community of people that can help you support this. Well, you're going to want to know what their email address is, duh, so you can get back to them. It'd be nice to know their name so it's not dear whoever you are. And then the last thing is know where they are. Ask them for a zip or a postcode. Now, if there's some other bit of information that is crucial or key, paramount to you being able to define or segment this community that you're trying to acquire, then add that in. But those are the 3 most critical pieces of data that you need: email address, name, and location. Location is important because we cannot solicit gifts. We in the United States cannot solicit gifts outside of our own state that we are registered unless we're registered in that state. Oh, just like direct mail, the same rules apply. If you solicit gifts in a state outside of the state that you are registered to fundraise in, you have to register in that state. You can register nationwide, you can register in clumps, you can register individual states, but that's something that you should be aware of. It may be that you're not really at the threshold of raising hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to where you have to worry about state AGs to come get you, but you want to plan for that success. So knowing the location of your constituency is key, especially when it comes to solicitation. Advocacy is different, but solicitation, you must be registered in the state in which you are soliciting. Same rules apply for direct mail as they do for online fundraising. Now, one other thing is in the attrition. So here's your page. Ask for the 3 pieces of information, submit, 1 screen. Now, in the scenario of raising money, you want the bare bones of what you need to process this gift. Name, address, city, state, zip, credit card, CVS, amount, and then any kind of attribute that you want in there, make it simple. KISS. And I'm not talking about like Beth or we're gonna rock and roll all night. Keep it simple, Sally, because we're not stupid. We're smart. And the idea is that you just put the basics for the transaction, for the financials of the transaction, and any type of designation of the gift so that you can link that direct impact of their gift, that accountability and transparency that you're investing with that donor, building that relationship, and moreover, identifying what their passion is. Because if they're gonna make their gift to feed puppies for a month and pay for their grooming and their worming and their shots, or I guess you don't get worms here because it's so cold, but the idea is that we know that this person loves puppies. So the next time we come out for a campaign, I'm not going to ask them about feline leukemia. I'm going to ask them about parvo. You know, you want to be targeted to what they like and what they want. So now we're going to get to my favorite part, Nerdville, which is not a Zynga game. It's a place that I live. There are roughly 600 million people on Facebook. It's like the third largest community or nation, if you will, if it was not virtual, in the world. And the average Facebook user spends 19 minutes a day on that site. Wouldn't you love it if someone spent 9 minutes a day or even 8 minutes a day on your website? Would you be okay if a donor spent 8 minutes a day on your website? If you answer no to that question, that's a philosophical problem that y'all should definitely work on. People don't go to the Dewey Decimal System or the card catalog or the public library to find out about your nonprofit. The first place they go is your website. That may not be the deciding factor of why they make a legacy gift, an important big gift, but the website is going to be one of the first places they go to find out about what your organization is doing and how they're meeting the needs that they state. Now, commercial social networks like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, Mixi, Armando, LinkedIn, which went public 2 weeks ago, interesting to watch that, is a great place to find advocates, donors, constituents, what I call social media evangelists. Beth Cantor, who is, I guess she is the godmother of social media. I guess we can give her that moniker today. We'll have to call Beth and let her know that we just gave her a new title. But nevertheless, the Pareto rule falls not only in the corporate world, but it falls in our world. The Pareto rule is generally that of 80-20. 80% of our money comes within 20% of the year. Most nonprofits receive 80% of their funding in the last 2 months of the year. Most nonprofits will get 80% of their money from 20% of their donors. Okay? And that same rule applies, interestingly enough, in social media. 20% of your social media users, your online community, are going to generate 80% of your content. And so with tools like Bitly and TinyURL and Twitalizer and Flowtown and Google Apps for nonprofits, you can identify who those 20% are and engage them. Rally those people. Feed them with the information that they need to be that social media evangelist, be that Samantha Brown, Sex and the City PR agent for your organization. You want someone out there giving that peer referent. Because if I tell Darian, oh my God, there's this place that has fried chicken just south of town, we have to go try it, it's better than my mama's, he'd be like, okay, let's go. But if he read it in the SF Gate, he'd be like, well, maybe. You're going to take peer referent and peer endorsement much more seriously with much more gravitas than that of any kind of promotional or paid advertisement or endorsement. That's just a duh. And the same rules apply. You want that peer referent power. I talked about the largeness of the social networking bubble, and I'm talking specifically about commercial social networks. Commercial social networks are that are free for users and nonprofits and constituents to sign up for. How many of you already have a Facebook page at your nonprofit? Great, very large majority of the people in the room. How many of you use groups? So not as many. Do you use groups and pages? Let's see on hands of groups and pages. Okay, so groups is something that Facebook is kind of just sweeping around over here because they've seen my napkin. I was like, what is that? They've seen that pages and profiles, because those are the basic species of Facebook. Profiles have friends. Pages have fans. Okay? And that I kind of like try to explain it that way. Groups have members. Groups are great ways to organize nonprofits that have chapter, affiliate, or satellite locations like Habitat for Humanity or Humane Society or the Salvation Army United Way or the Red Cross. You have like a headquarters, but then you have all of these locations that still operate independently outside of the overarching shell. One other thing that I want you to look at when it comes to fundraising and marketing, Being able to create this dialogue is very important. People are already out there saying things about your nonprofit. You need to make sure that they're saying accurate things and then engage them. And without having to come and just smack them down, no, that's wrong. There's 1,000 polite ways to go around it. I mean, it may not be, trying to think, pull out like an old episode on Hulu of Designing Women. It's a group of 3 Southern women and all trying to find nice ways of being ugly to each other. It'll give you new ways to come up with nice ways of correcting people's misinformation in a polite way, if you will. I find that Southern people, maybe I'm biased because I am one, have a way of just kind of turning something around that could be very negative. And I mean, I think we're the only people that can say, have a nice day, and it still be have a nice day, you know, and you're still saying the right words, but you mean something totally different. But the idea is that you have polite ways that you can redirect misinformation, and doing it without having to offend someone or making them feel as if they are not well informed. Maybe try to educate them and use that as an opportunity to create a new dialogue. Because people are saying things about you, you should be helping them say the correct and most, what's the word I'm looking for? Advancing things for your organization. And last but certainly not least, you need to think about who is online. So it's not the pimple face punks. It's not the millennials. It's not the Gen X's. It's not the Gen Y's. The fastest growing demographic on the web using commercial social networks are what we call the matures. And the matures are the nice word for the blue hairs, people that are born before 1945. 79% of Americans born before 1945 make charitable gifts of over $100 annually. That's a big percentage. That's the largest giving percentage. That's Pew Internet Trust numbers. They come out every 6 months. Now, the second largest group are the boomers. That's our parents, people that are born between 1945 and 1964. And 67% of those people make a charitable gift of $100 or more annually. And then Gen X is 58 and Gen Y is 56, which is about comparable, but we at Gen X and Gen Y don't really have that much, generally speaking, discretionary income. But one of the things that is interesting is that as the matures are becoming more and more online and plugged in because they want to see their grandkids, and they're buying things online and they're buying their tickets and they're Kindling and YouTubing and whatnot. It's so interesting. My mother cannot set her VCR any of the clocks in her house, but she can friend all of my friends in Facebook. And they're like, why is your mother friending me? I'm like, I don't know. She doesn't even have a picture. So it's just, you know, your mother, the blue avatar, y'all are laughing because you know people that have those blue avatars. You should never have the blue avatar for your organization. Anybody have blue? I mean, now that I've said that, nobody's going to raise their hand, of course. But if you have a blue avatar for your organization, please run, don't walk. If you're on your machine right now, go and find a graphic and put it up there so you have brand recognition with your Facebook page. Want to encourage you to create that dialogue and to make sure that, again, that you are testing, because you can test which tab people come to when they get to your Facebook page. You can test which discussion thread they get to. You can test in Facebook in seeing if they're male, female, where they're from, what they're posting, how many people are commenting on their posts. All this information is available to you that nonprofits really didn't have available to them at that price point before. And now we as nonprofits can truly afford to have the type of sophisticated metrics that, you know, only the big top Fortune 100 companies had before. And it's to us now. So with that, we're going to talk about corporate partnerships.
Yeah. And actually, let me just add a couple quick points on the social media stuff, because Nikki brought up a few points here, and this is obviously a topic we could talk a lot about. In fact, I'm in the process of launching a whole nationwide conference series called Social Media for Nonprofits, and that'll be kicking off here in San Francisco on June 29 in the green room at the War Memorial right next to City Hall. So happy to talk with any of you about that further. And if you're interested in learning more, you can go to nonprofits101.org. The Social Media for Nonprofits website will be up in the next couple of days, actually. But the things I wanted to point out, because Nikki talked a lot about test, and test some more. You know, the fundamental difference with online marketing and what this makes possible is that the nature of accountability has changed, right? It is now direct, immediate, and complete. And what do I mean by that? In the old days, if you wanted to run a Super Bowl ad, if you were Pepsi, you would do a small focus group of a representative sample, and you would show them an ad and ask them what they think they might do based on a result, based as a result. And now what are we doing? Now we're not just taking a representative sample, we're looking at the entire group that is seeing an ad, right? So it's complete. It's also direct. We're not asking people what they think they might do, we're watching them. And it's immediate, it's happening in real time. So the point is, when you're fundraising or marketing online, it creates unparalleled opportunities to gain a really clear sense of what's working and what's not, and make changes rapidly, right? It does take some personnel and some time, but to the extent you're able to make that time and capacity available, huge things are possible. The other thing is that a lot of people think about using their social network from a nonprofit or social entrepreneurship standpoint to raise money and to spread the word. And both of those are hugely important. It's a lot about what we'll talk about at the conference and what's in the book. But the other thing that Nikki points out in her chapter is that it's really important also to leverage your social network for public recognition.
That's what I forgot.
So to thank the people that are your most active supporters, whether they're giving or just tweeting or posting stuff about your work, and to use your online channels, your Facebook, your Twitter, et cetera, to just point a finger at someone and lift them up and say thank you, because that's going to really encourage them to do more for your cause.
I want to drop a quick
please.
little thing on this, because I've clipped all this and my 39-year-old eyes are like, hey. But just to kind of underscore how important it is to leverage your social network and peer-to-peer, I totally brain-pooted that out, is, for example, with Causes, which is out of Amy Allison's favorite town in the entire nation, Oakland. Joe Green created Causes. If you set up your birthday wish through Causes, how many of you have had a birthday wish through Causes or met a birthday wish through Causes? So you know what I'm talking about. So they did some research on that. And if you send 20 emails to your friends and family saying, give me money for my birthday instead of a present, you're 315 times more likely to raise money. If you invite 50 friends to raise money with you after you've already made that gift, you're 295% more likely to raise more money. And if you post this to your Facebook wall, and other people see it that know the birthday person, whether it's you or the person you made a gift to, you're 210 times more likely to raise more money. So your lowest common, the lowest chance of increasing this is 210, and your highest is 395%. So Causes is the easiest way. Everybody's got a birthday.
Yeah.
Bless you. They may not have a direct link to your organization or the mission that you're raising to, but you as an individual, everyone's got a birthday. Everyone has friends.
And circling back to some of the initial points, people give because they're asked. So now we have new ways, new channels, and new media of asking people to support our work. A couple points I want to make quickly here are that when it comes to corporate partnerships, I want to point out a few things, because as far back as the year 2000, Newsweek had a story saying that checkbook philanthropy is dead. And obviously, I disagree with them. There's still over $300 billion a year that are donated just to nonprofits, and then there's the whole social enterprise market. But when Nikki talked about asking people for support, she said time, talent, and treasure. Treasure is the financial part, right? But time and talent, so asking people to volunteer, asking people to contribute what and who they know, as opposed to just their time or their money. So that's really important when it comes to corporate partnerships. You can certainly pitch people on sponsorship opportunities. Bootcamp, as an example, has sponsors. And to the extent you're able to offer people an opportunity to support your work and partner with you and spread the word about their business, there's huge opportunities there, right? That's part of what made Bootcamp possible. But the other thing is that there's the whole non-cash side of the equation. And I want to encourage everybody to think about in-kind donations. I started Craigslist Foundation out of my bedroom with no budget. By the time we grew it to a $2 million organization, half of that budget was in kind. Right? I don't know if any of you have had Lagunitas beer. It's tasty and organic. But these guys are amazing. They support a ton of nonprofits. Right? It's a lot easier, if you think about in Economics 101, profits equals revenue minus expenses. So yes, you can bring in more money on the high end, or you can decrease your expenses on the low end. If you've got a gala or an event, and you're going to be serving beer, you should get that donated, just like the wine, the food, etc. And a lot of times those in-kind donation asks are much easier than the cash asks. The other thing that can be done is media sponsorships. Just like Bootcamp, again, has several media sponsors. This is something where you can promote them as a sponsor of the event, and they can help promote your work to their audience of readers or subscribers. And then finally is this whole point about corporate partnerships. And this can look like people pouring soup at a soup kitchen or licking envelopes and things like that. But more and more what research is showing is that people are not just interested in donating their time, they also want to donate their talents. They want to leverage their network. So, the baby boomers that are retiring, if they were an accountant for 50 years, a lot of them want to help you with your accounting. So the biggest change that we're going to see in the nonprofit sector in particular, in my lifetime, is that the fundamental concept of volunteerism is about to undergo a revolution. And what's in particular going to change is this whole concept of pro bono service, and that expanding beyond just lawyers. Taproot Foundation started here in San Francisco. They've been getting corporate volunteers from all around the country to leverage their expertise. I work with a group called Full Circle Fund. There's lots of different groups getting into this space.
I will glaze over this lightly because it's something that is definitely self-serve. If you were a 501c3 US-based nonprofit, Google for Nonprofits has a suite of tools that are available to you for free or highly discounted. Very affordable, easy to reach for all size budgets and staff. Number one is Google AdWords. When you search for something, there's going to be the sponsored results here and then the ads that are over here. Google for Nonprofits will provide you with a Google grant to fund your AdWords campaign starting at around $10,000 a month. That's a lot of money. Now, it sounds a little overwhelming, but it's so much per click, and it's $1 per word. Let's see, let me back up and try to make this not so crazy. So what you have to do is create your ad, and it's kind of like tweeting because you only have a certain amount of characters and 3 lines that you can put in your ad, and you want them to be as closely indexed with the pages that you're trying to bring them to, so you have very few clicks for them to respond to that call to action, whatever that ad is. If it's for volunteering, take them to a volunteer form. If it's for giving, take them to a donation form in this AdWords campaign. And the words that are in the ad should be the same words or some of the same words that you find in the page. That's the call to action page, as well as any landing page or page on the website where this ad will touch out to. So Google AdWords is one of the things that Google for Nonprofits offers you. Enhanced YouTube channels, premium Google Earth features, especially if you're a locations-based or responding to things, advocacy or environmental issues. It's really nice to have the Google Earth features in there.
And there is a page, if you just go to google.com/nonprofits, they kind of lay out a little brief tutorial of the different tools that they make available for free to nonprofits. Google Grants is kind of my favorite, and it's brought up in probably 4 different chapters in the book, just because it's a pretty simple application. It's just google.com/grants. They're very generous. Pretty much everyone I've known that's applied has always gotten one, and it's $10,000 a month of free advertising on Google. So what can you do with that from a standpoint of supporting your fundraising, marketing efforts, et cetera? And so, to Nikki's point, there's a lot that you can do in terms of going deep down the rabbit hole of optimizing those campaigns, and that will result in better impact and better leveraging your Google grant. But we probably don't have as much time as we'd like to go into the details of that here. Happy to talk with some of you offline, and also we'll be covering that in the Social Media for Nonprofits conference series. Anybody know this guy on the right? Or how about the guy on the left? Ronnie Lott? Anybody remember him, 49er?
Oh, is that the pinky guy?
This is Daniel Lurie. This is actually Kamala Harris, the district attorney. So I just went to a fundraiser about 2 weeks ago that raised $6.5 million in one night. Right? I don't know if anybody's heard about the Tipping Point community. And Daniel Lurie is the founder and executive director of Tipping Point Community. They're based on the Robin Hood Foundation in New York, which does a similar huge gala, one-night-a-year event, raises gazillions of dollars and then uses it to support poverty-oriented organizations in New York City. Tipping Point does that here in the Bay Area. amazing event, tons of stars, you know, but we can't all be Tipping Point, right? We can't all raise $6.5 million in one night. And in fact, you know, the point I really wanted to make here, and that Marika Holmgren makes in her chapter on event production, is that all too often nonprofits and community-based organizations will put a lot of effort and energy into a fundraising event and either break even or lose money, right? And so it's really important, before you get into it, to take the time to diligently put together a budget and to be realistic on the expense side, to budget a contingency line, to create something around all of the different pieces as detailed as possible that you expect to go into that, and not to assume that everything will be donated. In fact, assume that you have to buy everything. And then make sure that the numbers work. Make sure you've got your board support. Make sure you've got community support, and that you've got sufficient time to pull together the host committee, the sponsors, the attendees, et cetera. And what Marika talks about in her chapter is this notion of doing a 2-to-1 ratio for fundraising events. If you're doing an event and it's intended to fundraise, when you do that budget, you should be making at least twice as much money as you're spending. And if you're not, you should reconsider it. And maybe it's not a fundraising event. Maybe it's a friend raiser, and it's about nurturing relationships with people in your community. But take the time to actually put that budget together and look at exactly how those numbers work out. And then finally, the last point I wanted to make, because I appreciate that bootcamp is no longer just about nonprofits. And one of the other things that we focus on in the book is the whole idea of earned income. So whether that's for a nonprofit or a social enterprise, there's this entire field around social entrepreneurship that's been bubbling up now since the 70s, actually. And Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, really kind of popularized the concept. So now there's all these people that are out there, whether they're for-profits fundraising from impact investors or nonprofits looking to get earned income streams off of the ground. Right here in San Francisco, we have Juma Ventures, we have Rubicon programs, New Foundry Ventures. It's a great hub. So a few things I just want to quickly say about this. So if you are a nonprofit and you're launching an earned income enterprise because you want to start to create more revenue for your organization, the most important thing is to stay on target. This comes up like about 30 times in the chapter, is don't start something that's totally unrelated, because it will take a lot of effort, it will take a lot of energy, and it will be a huge focus of the organization. So that needs to be in synthesis. It needs to, there needs to be synergy between that initiative and the organization as a whole. At the same time, appreciate that if you're going to go out there and raise money for this earned income enterprise, for the social enterprise, that it is much more difficult and much more challenging to raise money than it is as a regular business, right? Because as a regular business, what happens? You can take loans, you can give people equity, they can make an investment. We can't do that. Why? Because every nonprofit, there's over 1.5 million nonprofits in this country, every one of them is owned by the same person, the same group, which is the public. Not the board, not the founders, not the staff. So you can't legally give away equity. You can't give away profits. So that makes it more difficult to fundraise. What that translates to is a pretty big difference in the amount of time you're going to be spending raising money for your project. Normally as a business, you spend about 5% of your time raising money, and then you're off to the races until you have to raise money again. As a for impact instead of a for-profit company, a lot of times you'll spend up to half of your time raising money, so you need to be prepared for that getting into it. And then the final thing is that there are organizations, many of which are based here in the Bay Area, that are sort of like the Good New Boys Network instead of the Good Old Boys Network. It's a group of passionate investors, people with financial means, that are proactively looking for earned income enterprises to invest in. These are called impact investors. And some of those forums, they all do annual conferences, which are great. SOCAP just happened here a couple months ago. They're right now in Amsterdam. They're doing their first European conference. So that's social capital markets, which is sort of the generic term for this investment market. SVN, Social Venture Network, is based in the Presidio. They do an annual member conference. And finally, Investor Circle, another really great opportunity to plug into people that are looking to invest in these kinds of organizations. So hopefully those are some of the concrete tips. If you're interested in reading a little bit more, we have created sort of a white paper with these top 10 fundraising tips. So if you go to nonprofits101.org, right on the homepage you'll see top 10 fundraising tips. You can download it for free, just put your email in there. And we can also keep you posted on the social media for nonprofits events. There's an event page there. But thank you all so much for the work that you do in building stronger communities. And it's wonderful to be back at boot camp.